incredible team, our kind of incredible trustees, incredible community of artists, right? Like, are we listening and learning? Because I think as museums are trying to course correct, as we are in a moment of demands for social justice, sometimes we think we're doing the right thing, and then maybe it isn't the right thing. So how do you listen and learn, and once you know better, do better?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Empire, where we like to engage with interesting people and have interesting interviews with those people. And we like to engage with everyone from pastors to actors, rappers to trappers, and everybody in between. And guess what? We have another great guest for you today. But before we get into it, please like the video. Subscribe to the channel. We appreciate everyone's support. If you want to support us in any other way, we'll have the links down in the bottom, such as CASHAPP, VENMO, Patreon, and all those other things. Right? But other than that, we're going to get into our amazing guest, who is the executive director of the RAM, which is the Riverside Art Museum, and also the Cheech, correct?
Riverside Art Museum, has several programs, including the Cheech.
Yeah, and her name is Drew Oberjuerge. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Welcome to the Empire, Drew.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's so lovely to have you. And how's your day been so far?
Good. It's beautiful. It's crystal clear out. You can see the mountains and the entire valley. So driving to the Garcia Center from the Riverside Art Museum was just beautiful today.
I guess it's some of the benefits of being in California, Southern California, right? Like we're almost it's technically winter, fall right now, technically.
I know.
Right?
It's beautiful.
Yeah, and
Clear
it's like
skies.
70 degrees today,
Yep.
which is like a benefit. But then we're also in the high desert, so in summer it can reach 110.
Correct.
So I guess you gotta like take your blessings, I guess, when they come.
Exactly.
Are you more of a hot person or a cold person?
I think I'm more of a hot person. I was born here in the Inland Empire, and I had jaundice as a kid, and so as a baby. So, apparently was like the vitamin D, so I was put in the windowsill, right? So I think I've liked the feeling of like the sun, heating up my skin and body from just a very early age. Like I think retiring in Palm Springs with the heat, like that just seems amazing to me.
Yeah. That's
What
the goal.
about you?
I'm a hot guy.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. People are like, oh, I love cold because I can put on extra jackets and stuff like that, which I think is cool because like the fits are different. But if you give me an option between hot and cold, burn me up, I guess.
Yeah. I even think like, could I even handle super cold? Like I've lived 43 years in Southern California. Like, I don't know how I would do in a winter environment. So
I've been to like a European winter where like scarves are obviously a big thing, right? But I remember one time we were out during during one of the cold snowing periods, and the wind blew and I felt my skin crack, like literally like rip open. And I'm like, yeah, no.
not for me.
No.
Yeah.
Can you imagine just like walking outside?
Yeah, my brother, he studied in Indiana for 1 year, and he said, that like how dry your skin gets with the cold, So he'd have to have like, body lotion to take with him everywhere because his skin would just get so dry. Yeah. So I've only heard stories, haven't experienced
Gotcha.
it.
You haven't been to visit your brother in Indiana yet?
He was there for 1 year,
Oh,
and then he
okay.
came back.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So Drew, for people who may not know who you are and what you do, can you please tell us all who you are and what you do?
Oh, wow. My full name is Drew Ellen Oberjuerge. Was born and raised in the Inland Empire, born in Loma Linda University, just right over there. And my mom was a teacher in San Bernardino Unified School District for many years. And my dad worked just down the street here, D Street at the San Bernardino Sun for many years. The Garcia Center has a really special place in my heart because it's part of artists and community leaders coming together to build creative spaces in San Bernardino. I have served as the executive director of the Riverside Art Museum since March 2012. I'm married to a designer named Owi Sunananda. I have a daughter named Una Sunananda, who's 3 years old. She loves museums and art as much as my husband and I do. I like to garden.
Gotcha.
We have a
Is that
garden.
name West African? Your husband?
Which one? He's Thai
Thai.
American. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He and his family came to the United States when he was 8 years old.
Hmm.
And so he's been there since then. So yeah, Sunananda. It's interesting. The Thai is actually Sunanan, but it was Latinized by some missionaries, I think, in the 19th century in Thailand. So kind of an interesting story
Story.
of his
Yeah.
name, right?
Yeah.
So if you meet another Sunananda, they're probably like direct cousins or something with my husband.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what else I like to do. I love hiking, um, and I love travel and learning about different cultures. And yeah, that's about me.
Gotcha. And the reason why because the name almost sounds like West African, like, or
Oh,
African, the
interesting.
way the Sunanda, like you could easily, but what we like to do a lot here, Drew, is just get to know people a little bit better and cool. And you mentioned you're an IE native, so born and
Yeah.
raised,
Yep.
right? Can you give us a brief background story of where you grew up, how you grew up, all the way up to you being the executive director of the RAM Museum?
Oh, wow. Thanks. This is it seems so like indulgent to be like, let me talk about myself
Well,
for, all
well,
this
that's why you're
time.
here.
Um, yeah, I think growing up in the Inland Empire definitely shaped who I am. I think growing up here, you have such a love for the people and the landscape, the diversity of the people, diversity of the landscape, this like can do spirit, right? When you think about the resources that the Inland Empire has versus resources that coastal areas have, Los Angeles, San Francisco, we just don't have those many resources, right? So
Mhm.
you hear these stories of like people coming together, making something happen, despite all odds, right?
Mhm.
I think being in the Inland Empire right now, I think is a very exciting moment that I think that people are really feeling pride about what it means to live here and work here and all that's been done. Where I think sometimes, growing up, you'd hear a lot like, oh, the Inland Empire is an hour to the beach or an hour to the mountains, right? It was all about it as a destination to go someplace else. But I
Yeah.
think people now are discovering that the Inland Empire itself is the destination, right? Like it is the goal. So for me, I think that's just so exciting, and I think that there's a lot of really interesting moments. The People's Collective of History, mapping projects, oral history projects, to really deep dive and understand our unique history, maybe what was not taught in the schools, and so I think it's just a very exciting time to be working here.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And can you give us a brief story about where you grew up, how you grew up
Sure.
to where we are today?
Yeah. So I grew up in Highland, California, and trying to remember, I some of my earliest memories are I went to a school. I think it was off of Del Rosa, and there was like a big field behind the school. So sometimes, like, we would leave the playground and like go play in this like big field.
Uh-huh.
And I remember there was like really tall grasses and flowers, and it's I think basically like the 210 freeway now. Like, but at the time it was just this like open field. And those were incredible stories. Also, growing up in Highland, being able to hike up in the orange groves and past the orange groves to the San Bernardino
Mm.
Forest. I think so many of my early memories in this area are like tied to really the earth, right? Like being
Mhm.
able to play outside and feel the air. Those are the good memories. I mean, the flip side to that is growing up in the 80s. I remember going up the hill and then seeing just like this blanket of smog like
Oh, wow.
covering the whole entire valley. Like, I don't know, did you grow up here? Do you
No, not in San Bernardino.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and so for me, like today, just like driving over here from Riverside to be able to see how crystal clear everything is, that you can see, the mountains. To me, that's just a huge feat because in my lifetime, at 43 years, like seeing the air quality that was so bad get really, really good. But now, of course, with the logistics industry and the increased pollution, some of those like gains that we've made in terms of air quality are going back.
Okay.
And then a lot of those open spaces that I grew up like walking through have been developed, whether it was the freeway or home housing development, or even sort of, the logistics industry, like those popping up. And I think that's still very jarring for me is when I'm driving through places that I grew up in, or maybe I worked in or something like, hey, whoa, this wasn't here,
Yeah.
20, 30 years ago.
Logistics like warehousing? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, like the
Gotcha.
warehousing,
Okay.
that popped up, even from the wash from Highland to Redlands, logistic industry that popped up. I think also some of the things like when I was born in 1980, I think it was in the fall of 1980, there was the Panorama fire that burned in the hills here in San Bernardino.
Okay.
And I remember hearing stories about that, my entire life, like so-and-so's house burnt down, or there was this fire. And then, of course, growing up and there always being some fires, certainly I think there was a big one in 2003. I was down at school in San Diego and I couldn't come back here. But I remember my dad, was one of those people that like, even though the fire department said you have to move on, was like, no, I'm going to stay with my house. I'm going to stay here. Right. So I think like growing up in the Inland Empire, I mean, having a connection to these beautiful outdoor spaces, but then also kind of even from a young child, sort of dealing with concepts of smog, air quality, concepts of, really hot days, concepts of, things being developed, right? Concept of extreme weather events.
Yeah.
Those I think really weigh so heavily on people who grew up here. You remember those moments. Also, I think the closure of Norton Air Force Base, like growing up, I remember in elementary school, there were kids whose parents like went to Norton Air Force Base, and then Norton Air Force Base closing, and then seeing sort of the decline of that area around Norton. I remember the San Bernardino that I knew in the early 1980s versus the early, 2000s was so different. My
Gotcha.
dad, San Bernardino's son, relocated. My step-grandfather's, office moved. A lot of things like moved and shut down. And so there was a lot of feeling of sort of loss, right? But now just seeing the artist community and community activists here in San Bernardino, like reclaiming the space, like boldly talking about the opportunities that are here, the communities, right? The communities that are so rich in history and culture. It just gives me a satisfaction to no end to see that.
Yeah.
You know?
And what did you go to school for in San Diego?
So in San Diego, I went down with like a cohort of about like 18 folks from my school, went to Redlands High School. There was just, I think, one high school at that time when I graduated. Now there's like 3 or 4. And I studied political science, and I wanted to be like an ambassador or something.
Okay.
But I studied
For like San Bernardino or
I
the
just
Inland
like,
Empire?
yeah, just for like US for the ambassador. You can work
Okay.
around the world. Like
Yeah.
my brother does that. Like he's living in Kenya right now, working for the State Department.
Wow.
And as a young person, I was like, oh, that'd be like so cool. But I studied abroad in Italy, and I had studied German. My family's German American.
Okay.
So I studied German, but the idea of going to Germany cold for a winter
There
for a
we
year
go. Yes.
versus like Italy, and I had some friends. So, I didn't speak any Italian, and I think I had like 2 trimesters of Italian before I went. And, I lived with Italians. I went to Italian classes. So there wasn't like an American school there. Like they put you in school with Italians, and to
You
sort of
gotta like
like
catch up, basically.
right,
Okay.
and to like lose your language ability. Like I'd always been very precocious in terms of being able to speak and to express myself, and to be in a space where I could not express myself the way that I wanted to in my head and my Italian,
Mm,
both in my living situation and both at the university, I think gave me a profound respect for the immigrant experience, right? Where you're feeling you are there in your body, but you are different and you cannot, there's parts of yourself that you can express. And
yeah.
I remember being in a class and I spoke, and the teacher brought me up to the classroom and she said, class, she doesn't sound American, does she? She doesn't look American, does she? Like, do you think she looks Swiss? She's got to be Swiss. And I remember the
Uh-huh.
kids in the class were just like, oh, they were like cringing for me.
Okay.
But, to like have people say like, God, your Italian is so bad. You really need to practice. And this, you're not saying this right or that right. It really, really profoundly, affected me. And so I think about my husband coming here as an 8-year-old from Thailand with his parents, and them knowing like a few family members, and then for them to be able to navigate the school system and get jobs. I mean,
Yeah.
really, truly, the immigrants in our community, like the strength that they show, just the fortitude, the bravery, right? I think
Yeah.
it's just so, it's really something, that experience profoundly affected me. But being in Italy, surrounded by the art and the architecture, I was like, I really want to do art. I love art. And, growing up, I wasn't really exposed to a lot of visual arts. I did theater. I love theater, Redlands High School. I got voted best actress, class of
Okay.
98.
Hey.
But I was like, visual arts, this is what I want to do. But at this point, I had so many credits for political science. I decided to double major in Italian literature and political science, political theory. And rather at this time, America had a pretty aggressive strategy in Iraq, and then later in Afghanistan.
This is during Bush's administration.
Right.
Okay.
And so I realized that for me, the power of arts to touch people individually through exhibitions that, they call it diplomatic soft power, was more sort of aligned like with my values than representing a nation state that, may make decisions that you don't necessarily as an individual agree with.
Gotcha. Can you explain a little bit more about this diplomatic soft, you said?
So it's soft power.
Soft
And
power.
this is probably not like an official definition or anything, but this idea that you can build alliances, you can help convince people, you can tell a story, you can build bridges, can be done through like hearts and minds. It can be done through expressing the human experience. So literature, arts, music, dance, conversations,
Okay.
media, newspapers,
Gotcha.
round table discussions, that can be more effective than hard power, which can be military strength or might, doing things through traditional, I guess, interstate or, international relations.
Gotcha.
So that sort of really shifted me. And I think throughout my career, my first job at a museum was at the San Diego Chinese Historical Museum in San Diego. And then later at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. Came back here to Riverside to do a really important project for me. It was called Artworks, and it's still in existence. I was the founding director, and it provided art experiences for people with lived experiences of mental health or substance abuse and homelessness. And we worked with a drama therapist at Cal State San Bernardino that worked with program participants to create a play about their lived experiences through mental health journey that we performed for state electeds and things.
Okay.
And then, of course, now at the Riverside Art Museum and the work with the Cheech. And I feel that I have been able to travel in many ways and understand different lived experiences and perspectives through my museum experience. And I think it's, helped me have a better understanding of the human experience in the United States, and also has helped me become much more empathetic. And so through that soft power and through, you know, learning through artists and things, I think I've become a better citizen, have a more global perspective.
I like
And
that.
so, yeah, if that's making any sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And I love that, and when you mentioned soft power, it reminds me I was watching Neil deGrasse Tyson's show, and he had some gentlemen on, and I guess they were getting a global award
Mhm.
for, I can't remember the film that they made, but they made a film that kind of helped ease tension during the Cold War.
Mhm.
And I guess the movie was about some kid who was able to hack into the Pentagon
Mm.
and stuff like that. And so I guess it was like a groundbreaking idea that helped make relations between that time better. And so it reminded me of that, like
Yeah.
soft relations and the importance of art. And I also wanted to say, like, um, when not being able to speak the language, like not having like the native tongue of something, it makes you appreciate like people who don't speak the language and who are moving around in
Yeah.
America,
Yeah.
because you're like, wow, it is a lot tough. Like, and then I also, in my opinion, I think that people who speak more than one language are actually a lot more intelligent than we give them because it's so hard to speak another tongue.
So hard, so
Yeah.
hard. And I mean, there's people living here in the US every day that speak two, three languages, right?
Hmm.
Really, really commendable. The one thing I'll say about soft power museums is that museums in the past
Yeah.
have done it in
Can you stay
problematic
closer to the
ways.
mic?
Oh,
Yeah, there we
sure.
go.
Museums in the past have done it in problematic ways where it's like, we're going to take this artifact from its home, whether that be Africa, Thailand, India, and we're going to put it in a museum in England or Los
Got
Angeles.
you.
And so I want to put that caveat out there that museums are having to reconcile with sort of their
Mm,
colonial approach in the past to knowledge sharing. And, I'm the expert. I'm going to tell you about your culture. And
mm,
so, I put that out there because museums are trying to relook at how they're doing that work and shifting that idea of expertise and returning artifacts even to
ah,
their homelands, and where they belong. So while museums and artists are a great way to give insight into knowledge into others' human individual experiences, collective experiences, cultures, there does have to be sort of a critical analysis of that work and a look at more equitable ways of doing it.
yeah.
So, and I think, museums have come so far. During my career, I've been in museums since like 2001.
Hmm.
And I remember interning in Naples, Italy. And at the time, repatriation came up a little bit about their concerns in Italy of loaning some of their classical items to institutions in the United States that maybe they wouldn't get them back
Oh,
or that
wow.
they should get some work returned. And that was in 2003. And to see the dialogue about what is right in terms of repatriation, and what should be returned to native homelands has come so far in the last 2 decades.
Hmm.
And another thing I thought was interesting is when I was there and people were discovering things with Pompeii, it's like Pompeii's so famous. Like, wow, they're still uncovering things, and they are.
To
They're
this
still
day?
to this day,
Wow.
still making like new discoveries about, those areas all around the Bay of Naples. And so I think for me, with my career, just that progress can be made, that critical conversations can happen. There's new discoveries and curiosities every single day. So I think we're in the midst of a lot of change. And again, when I started my museum experience, people thought, oh, museums, libraries, with the internet now, people are going to be able to get, all of this information online. We won't need libraries. We won't need museums. And I think both libraries and museums are so important these days and are at the site of much contestation about what art is shown, what books are made available. So they are more important than ever, right? But they're also sites of complexity and critical engagement about whose stories are being told, whose stories are being told by whom,
Yeah.
and what is the agency for communities, to enact their goals and desires and wishes in regards to their own culture. So,
Wow. And
yeah.
then I got so many questions, and hopefully I can remember them all. But I'm gonna go right to it. So there's actually been situations where other museums are concerned with letting, okay, like so Italy being concerned with letting people in America borrowing it because America won't give it back. That's actually a thing.
And it could have, I'm trying to remember, it could have been the vice versa. It could have been the reverse as well, where
But
Americans were concerned if it went to Italy, they're like, thanks for finally bringing it back and not giving it back. But
uh,
there's a lot. And I don't have citations here, but there's a lot of information available on podcasts and on the internet right now.
okay,
The British Museum in particular has come under a lot of scrutiny about bronzes from Benin
okay,
that are, finally going back. So yeah, it's a huge, and I think it was in Black Panther, right? Where one of the characters came and there was something really important to him in a glass case. And then if I'm not mistaken, they had to kill the curator to get the pieces.
okay.
Yeah, I haven't seen the movie, but I was like, wow, museums have made it big, and questions about repatriation are really in the mainstream right now
Yeah,
with it being in this huge blockbuster.
gotcha. And the internet makes everything so accessible.
Right, right. But they're important, really important questions about a collection and accessibility. And I know the Museum of Us in San Diego has a large collection of indigenous artifacts, and there's traditional ways in museums about how you take care of certain objects. And they had someone come and visit from the community where the object was from and was like, you're doing this totally wrong.
Got you.
This is how you need to take care of this piece. And it wasn't traditional museum knowledge.
Got you.
And so the collections manager did exactly as the community member advised them to do. And the piece would just shone. It just came alive. And so, there's a lot of fixed ideas of Western knowledge of how things should be, very enlightened, enlightenment, schools of enlightenment of how things should be taken care of, or classifications of knowledge. And those are very from a certain time and a certain perspective. And so now museums are reconciling their work.
Another thing when you're saying about museums, what they call it, repatriate, is that
Repatriation.
repatriation? It immediately made me think of the Vatican, which is in Italy, and I heard they have more, or I hear that most museums have more in their basement than what they're actually displaying, right?
Yeah, and again, this is why I want to go back into the video. I'm like, if my stat is wrong,
Oh,
I'll
it's
get you
okay.
the stat. I mean, it's something like I think 6% or something on average of museums' collections are shown at any given time.
Okay,
So museums are,
6%.
yeah, museums are
Wow.
just amassing these huge collections that are stored, right? Yeah, in a collection storage in a basement. And that storage work is so critically important. You have to have the right HVAC. You have to make sure that you've tracked everything properly. You need to make sure that you've got pest management. You need to make sure that there's no mold or there's no liquid, that the humidity levels are right. And all of that work is very expensive, very time consuming. There are professionals who learn collections management and registrarial work. And yet it's it's not one of your like star pillars of a museum. Like when people think of
Yeah.
museums,
Yeah.
they think of education classes, they think of exhibitions. They don't necessarily think about the important work of storing all of these
Mm-hmm.
pieces. So there's some interesting new models of museums that don't collect. They say we're not going to collect. Like we're going to exhibit, we're going to do education programs, we're not going to collect. And then there's other museums that are thinking about deaccessioning their work. So, should I have this in my collection? Is it right for me?
Mm-hmm.
I think with the Native American
It's almost like
Graves
hoarding in a way.
Repatriation Act, thinking about human remains and other really significant pieces that are really critical to Native American communities should be returned, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. There is this like hoard that museums and collectors. It does come from, I guess you could say like a hoarding,
Yeah.
wanting to have all the things. But once you have all the things, right? Like, I'm a nonprofit. Riverside Art Museum is a nonprofit. And so it is our duty to not just collect all the things, but make the things accessible for the people in our community, right? That's why we're a nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you one, successfully steward all of those things so that they're here for generations to come? Two, how do you make them accessible? And then three, how do you have that critical conversation about, should this be with me? Should it be repatriated? Should it be returned? Should it be deaccessioned?
Yeah.
So these are very critical questions that
Yes.
museums have to ask themselves.
And sometimes the community that wants them back probably addresses them too,
Right,
as well.
right, right.
As being the executive director of the RAM for at least 12 years now,
Mm-hmm.
and you've been to museums in Naples and probably throughout the country and other places, I'm assuming. As the executive director of a museum, have you gotten any ideas from being at other museums to be like, hey, this would be really good if we incorporated that?
Yeah, oh, tremendously. One of my colleagues, Todd, it was so funny. He was traveling abroad and he was sending pictures of speaking of collections, there were these drawers made accessible in the exhibition space where you could pull it open and see the collection and then push it back and then open another drawer, see the collection. But also how things are exhibited, like literally adhered to the wall. So
Mm-hmm.
as a museum person, I'm thinking about the visitor experience. Did someone greet me? I'm thinking about the safety and security. I will say that whenever I go to a museum, I'm always the person that the security or the gallery attendants have to say, ma'am, can you step back a little?
Oh, because you're too close to the artwork.
Yeah, which is so
Uh-huh.
funny. I'm like, oh my gosh, I worked in museums for like 20 years, and here I am. Because I think I'm like looking at it and closely and forgetting. But I'm looking at the stores. I'm looking at the didactic content, right? Like, how are the themes of the exhibition put on labels? I'm looking at the lighting. I'm
Mm,
looking at the parking. Was it easy to park and get in? I'm thinking about all of those things,
when you
all
go
of
to a
those things.
museum.
Yeah.
Okay.
And thinking about, oh my gosh, yeah, like what could we do for us? But then I also understand that, if you're really being relevant to your community and to your unique mission, you're going to do things a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
So while there is best practices and there's good ideas, there's also really good ideas like within our community and with our staff members, right? So you always have to balance out what is like your own unique like idea versus what works at other institutions.
Mm-hmm.
Because museums, while we are all maybe identified as a museum, as something, that collects work and exhibits work and does education programming to, communicate the themes of the show, how each museum does that is also different because we all have different board of trustees, different environments in which we're working, different funding strategies, all sorts of things.
Got you. Different demographics,
Yep,
the whole
exactly.
nine. And I guess this is a perfect segue into it. So, what are some of your roles and responsibilities as executive director for the RAM?
Sure. So basically, the Board of Trustees hires me. I am their employee, and my job is to enact the board approved strategic plan. My job is to adhere financial best financial practices, right, in terms of budgeting, cash flow, revenue generation, expenses going out, fund development, right? So that's a huge important part of our revenue strategy, stewarding donors, stewarding foundations, public-private partners, being the main spokesperson for the institution, interfacing with electeds and with the community, ensuring, that like the exhibition program, the education program, community outreach program, that it all fits within our value system as well as the strategic plan.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you don't mind sharing with us, what's some of the ways that you're able to help find funding for the RAM?
Yeah. So the Inland Empire, we, I think we all know that our funding situation is different than like coastal areas. There was a
Yeah.
couple reports that came out. The California Arts Council just did a report about Arts Foundation funding. And of the entire Arts Foundation funding in the state of California, the Inland Empire receives 2% of that.
Wow.
And then another report came
Wow.
out that of all foundation funding in Los Angeles, we see 9% of that foundation support. We've historically seen fewer state funds, federal funds, from everything from judges to mental health beds, all of it, right? So we have some really wonderful elected officials that are working really hard to change that, right? So that we do get our fair share of public dollars. We also have the community foundations and other alliances working on bringing foundation equity to the Inland Empire, and also working to build the capacity to steward individual giving. Today is Giving Tuesday. It's a big day where a lot of nonprofits, ask people after, Black Friday and Cyber Monday to like give to your favorite nonprofit. But, that takes work, right? Someone crafting your message, your ask message, getting it out on your social media platforms, getting it in a constant contact, making sure that you've got your mailing list, that you can send it out to everyone. So some of the work that I've done at the Riverside Art Museum is to diversify our funding revenue. So we have a very diversified funding stream. So we do a lot of fee for service. We do education programs. We bring that into the schools. We do admissions. We do facility rentals. Working with the team really grew our facility rental program. So if you wanted to host an event or a wedding or a baby shower, you could come to the Riverside Art Museum or the Cheech during off hours. And that's a way for us to create revenue, right? That helps
Gotcha.
pay for toilet paper and health benefits and salaries. Also working with our public agencies on special partnerships. So the Cheech Mining Center is a great example of that. It's a public-private partnership with the City of Riverside, Riverside Art Museum, and Cheech Mining, where the City of Riverside has given us funding for 10 years. It covers about 30% of our overall operating expenses for the Cheech, but it provides us some stability in funding that we're able to leverage to foundations and donors. One of my biggest goals, and I've learned so much working under Ofelia Valdez-Yeager, who was our campaign chair, and she's a powerhouse, and she always says I'm not a professional fundraiser. And I'm like, but I am, and I learned everything from you. So you must be, was major giving, capital giving, right?
What are those?
So foundations often give and they say, we want you to do this with the funding. It's usually programming.
Okay.
And
Like we want a program for children to learn how to draw.
right, exactly.
Okay.
But they're very real cost of just doing business. You have to pay for your financial team, right? To keep track of your revenue and expense records, to do your audit, which is mandatory for any organization in the state of California that makes over $2.5 million, to make sure we're paid on time, to make sure that we're administering our retirement program, make sure we pay vendors in a proper time so they're not like, ooh, I don't want to work at the Riverside Art Museum, right?
Yes, good
Keep
business.
track of the people who who donated. So we can say, you know, Mr. Smith, you gave us all of this money over the years. Thank you so much, right? So that costs money, right? And that's, it's called indirect costs. It's often behind the scenes. You need a fundraising team, right? Like we have an incredible fund development director who writes grants, and those take so much time. And she works with marketing on a membership campaign. Speaking of, if you become a member of the Cheech and Ram, you get this limited edition pin of Cheech. We have to get the word out with marketing, right? Sending press releases, getting things on social media. So those are all supporting activities. You have human resources, right? Are we onboarding people properly? Does everyone know our policies? Are policies in compliance with the state of California and federal rules? So there's all of these like very real costs associated with running a business.
Yeah.
And oftentimes people want to fund the mission critical work, like the education program or the exhibition program or the tangible things that you can see. So enter in major giving. As major giving is working with individuals who will give you a gift each year, every couple of years, be investing in you, in your work. Some of it may be restricted. Our words for can only be used for education or only used for exhibitions. But some of it can just say, hey, we want to invest in your organization. We're going to give you this funding so that you can do what you need to do.
It's like a pledge.
Right. And so sometimes it's a pledge where I'm going to give you, we did that for the Cheech campaign. I'm going to give you $5,000. I'm going to pay it over 5 years. It's going to be $1,000 a year. I'm going to pay monthly. But it's really building up the people who believe in your mission. And the vast, vast majority of philanthropic giving is made up of individuals. The statistics I saw last was that foundation funding makes up about 14%. I think corporations give about 6%. But the rest, the vast majority, is individuals who give to their church. They give to their alma mater. They give to their child's school. They give to the food bank. They give to the art, the art museum that they love. And so one of the things that the Inland Empire has to do is really build our capacity to do individual giving and fundraising.
And it's probably affected also by the average income, right? So it's like people don't have that much discretionary income.
Yeah, although, research has shown that that the people with the least amount give the most.
Oh, wow.
In terms of in-kind support, like volunteering at their church, volunteering at the food bank, giving things. And so that's something that sort of like is a bit of a myth, and it bothers me in fundraising, is that you think like, oh, I've got to go talk to this wealthy person or that wealthy person. There's power in communities when they come together. There's giving circles where people pool a smaller amount, but many gifts together make a large amount, right?
I like that.
And so that's really important to me, is that there can be movement by community, by all pitching in many different ways. And so in kind, which is not a cash gift, can be really, really, really important. And again, the generosity that you see of people who, their $20 gift is as meaningful as a wealthy person giving $1,000 or $2,000. And I think if you can sort of crack that funding model and get crowdsourcing or a larger group of people giving funding, most likely your programming is going to be more accessible and relevant to them, because you're not under sort of like one person who gave you $30 million and they're like, you need to do this from here on out, right? It's a bit more democratic. So I've seen I've seen a lot of movement in philanthropy, looking at ways that we can democratize that giving experience and really valuing all people who give, right?
Wow, that's so cool. And it just, I love it. And I was gonna, because basically it's like you can always use somebody's either service or their financial service, but however they want to serve, right? And I was curious, because I know you're the executive director of RAM, but are you also in charge of the Cheech as well?
Sure. So in terms of administrative work, all of those things, I'm a public administrator.
Okay.
I'm not a curator. And so we have an amazing artistic director, Maria Esther Fernandez, who leads the research into the collection, who leads the artistic program
Okay.
in terms of the exhibition programming and the community outreach programming and things there. So I've learned so much from her.
Hmm.
I think for me, with the puzzle pieces, do all the puzzle pieces fit together?
Hmm.
Does all of this fit within our overarching organizational mission
Hmm.
to foster a sense of belonging, to support local artists, local curators? We're in the midst of our new strategic plan, and it's a strategic plan for the Riverside Art Museum as a whole, and how that plan will manifest in the Cheech or in the Julia Morgan Center, where our curator, Lisa Henry, does incredible projects, as well as guest curator Todd Wingate. It will manifest differently, but it's all sort of tied into our overarching goals, if you will.
Got you. Are
So
you able to share what that is, the new thing that you guys are doing?
sure. Well, it's in the works.
Okay.
So we have done deep listening to staff and to community. And what we're really hearing is about fostering a sense of belonging. Our organization grew really, really fast. So working on our infrastructure.
Okay.
So, right, you can expand your programming, but have you expanded your financial team or your administrative team or your marketing team to get the word out? So there's a lot of systems and things that we need to put in place. That's internal work.
Yeah.
But supporting local artists, local curators was something that we heard a lot. I think that there's this really dynamic moment right now in the Inland Empire, San Bernardino, Riverside, with emerging artists, established artists doing really incredible work. So how does the Riverside Art Museum with the Julia Morgan and the Cheech and the Affordable Housing Artist in Residency and the education program, how do we meaningfully contribute to this ecosystem?
That's happening. Okay.
That's happening. So we are now in the point where we're starting to think about specific goals. What are tangible strategies and outcomes for a 3-year period?
Okay.
Now that I'm
Okay.
43, I'm like 3 years is like tomorrow.
Yeah, time goes by fast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what are meaningful ways for us to enact that? So it's in the process. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And just so people can know and be reminded, what is the mission statement for RAM?
Sure. Currently, it's to engage, inspire, and build community through thought-provoking exhibitions and high-quality art education classes that instill a lifelong love of the arts.
Awesome.
And I think one of the things that we've been thinking about over the last couple years is beyond instilling a lifelong love of the arts. It's really, for me, about uplifting human dignity, right? And so we're thinking about the why question a lot more. Why
Okay.
do we do what we do? It's more than just having people like art. It goes back to changing people's lives by deeply understanding the lived experience of someone else, having increased empathy, understanding our interconnectedness, right?
Yeah.
Challenging your own fixed beliefs.
I love that. And you said you're a public administrator, right?
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily deal with which artists are allowed to perform or present, right?
Yeah, so I started doing, more direct programming things, but we have incredible staff who are experts in curatorial fields
Okay.
and in research. And so I spend a lot of time hearing their ideas and their thoughts, right?
Okay.
They allow me to meaningfully engage. And I certainly do have opinions,
Got you.
right?
Very nice to
Charles
say.
Bibbs, we got to do it, right? Only one Charles Bibbs. And certainly there's certain artistic practices that really resonate with me personally. But the museum is in itself an ecosystem of really talented people coming together. We have talented artists on the staff. So I think it's all about listening and learning from one another. And what I have found through my experience is that I can really provide support by helping organize, project manage, write a budget, fundraise, revenue strategy, think about what is our action plan moving forward. We can't do all the things right away. So how do we prioritize the things? So I have really found a calling in like doing that work. And I love working with curators and artists. It is never a dull moment. They're always doing something exciting. And I'm blessed to be able to be in that position. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. So what are some of the things that really mean, because you said there's some artwork or artists that really mean a lot. What are some of those that mean a lot to you?
I'm really interested in artistic practice, social practice artists, that artists are working with community and through that process, that is their artistic product.
Yeah.
So they may not be painting something, but they may be organizing a book exchange of ideas, right? I
Okay.
think artist practice within society is really interesting to me.
I see.
Creative placemaking projects. How do artists work together to change and transform the built environment, right?
Okay.
Whether that be murals or public art or artist happenings in a community. I love those. I think they create a sense of wonder and awe, right?
Got you.
Like, if you've ever experienced like a flash mob, right? Like,
Okay,
and just
flash mob.
transforming your experience, or,
I would love to see you in a
being,
flash mob. I would love to see you in a flash mob, Drew.
or like being in the Mission District and seeing all the murals and things, or being in a place where they use lighting to make trees look more dramatic. So I'm interested in
Got you.
creative placemaking, social practice artist. I've always loved decorative arts and design. That I think that there's a lot of people who are artists. There's a Sam Maloof book, a woodworker over there. He created practical things that we use, chairs and tables, and yet they're artistic and they're beautiful. And I love, Charles Bibbs was saying the other day that he always wanted, his goal was that every home have a Bibbs piece in it, right?
Okay.
And I love that he wanted to create something so accessible, and that his work is like shaping, families, your memories of the paintings in your home and things like that. And I think a lot about furniture. Everyone has furniture at home.
Yes. Yeah.
Everyone experiences driving in a car. And I think those are all creative endeavors, right? That those are creative things. And I think sometimes fine art has a connotation that like, oh, I don't know anything about paintings, like museums aren't for me, right? But creativity is around us everywhere. It's in the
Yes.
movies, the video games,
Yes.
in books, and
Clothes.
and that clothes, exactly. So that open-ended idea that museums are looking at fashion and architecture and design and product design, like to
Wow.
me, is really exciting. And then of course, I think
I can totally see a fashion show at the Ram.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I also think, there's so many artists that have not been included in the American art canon. So we talked about that storage of artists that are, in the basement and stuff. Vast majority are white male, right? So we have not been collecting BIPOC artists. We have not been collecting women artists. And so it's very important for me at the Cheech and the Julia Morgan that we are uplifting artists of color, uplifting female artists, all of those artists that have been meaningfully making for decades, like under the radar, making sure that their story is told, that there's a catalog that chronicles their work, so it is not lost to history. I'm very passionate about the history here in the Inland Empire. People often say, oh, the IE, no major art movements happen here. What
Yeah.
artists? There are so many things that have happened here. Cosme Cordova working for decades, with his work through Division 9. But if we don't do the shows and do the research and publish the work, we don't get the history out there. And it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? That there's nothing here. So I think uplifting the narrative of our community, of Chicano artists that have done so much that have not been included in the American art canon, creative placemaking, social practice, and then the applied arts. Those are all things that are really important to me.
Gotcha. And talking about community, I think you guys recently had Romaine Washington and her her poetry collective perform not too long ago, right? So that would be
Yes.
kind of like one of the things, right? If you're in the community.
Exactly, in all of its forms. And I think that might have been with Inlandia Institute.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, and so I think poetry, spoken word, dance, there's such great ways to further the themes of an exhibition, right? like not everyone is going to learn through visually. They may hear it in song, or they may want to dance it out, or they
Yeah.
may want to read about it in a story. So I love those collaborations to really make the themes of the exhibitions come alive.
And become bigger. So
Yes,
I know you
yes.
mentioned that you like to, you got the RAM likes to have like thought provoking art.
Right.
Is there a limit? Like we will not have this type of art?
We try hard not to do that. I
Okay.
think like we're in a time now of growing censorship of art around the world, whether it be sort of governments or even censorship coming through books and stories. And while we understand that we serve families and we serve children and things, I think there's ways where you can still have a thought-provoking exhibitions in ways that are accessible for others. So we try hard not to censor those voices. And I think that's really, really critical here in this region, that there is a site that is presenting other viewpoints, if you will,
Yeah.
right? We are artists are often doing that work, and so by providing them platform and space, they're able to share their unique viewpoints and voices.
Yeah. I personally think it's critical to hear everyone's freedom of expression, but I think some people were like, no, we don't. For example, like there's a big thing on guidelines about like hate speech.
Right.
People don't prefer hate speech, but I think one of the beautiful things about America is freedom of speech. And so sometimes, like, I'm not promoting hate speech or anything, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just saying I think it's important for people to be able to freely express themselves,
Right. Right.
however they feel. I'm not promoting any type of hate speech or anything like that, but I think if someone has an opinion about something and they want to express it through their art medium and they're not actually going out there trying to hurt a community physically
Right.
or
Right.
anything,
Right.
then okay. I would prefer seeing their artistic expression that way than out into a world.
Yeah, and it goes back to that responsibility to the families and the children, the responsibility to your values is that, yeah, I think, there's sometimes there's controversy to be controversial, right?
Okay.
But I think it's with responsibility, right?
Okay.
And so but again, these are such good questions that museums and libraries and other cultural institutions and universities are grappling with right now and in today. What does it mean to have responsible free speech? And so it underscores, I think, the importance of these institutions, but also the complexities of these conversations, right? And so they're hard conversations, but they're critical conversations. And I don't profess to know all of the answers. And
Yeah.
so again, going back to our incredible team, our incredible trustees, incredible community of artists, right? Like, are we listening and learning? Because I think as museums are trying to course correct, as we are in a moment of demands for social justice, sometimes we think we're doing the right thing, and then maybe it isn't the right thing. So how do you listen and learn? And once you know better, do better. So,
Yeah.
but with that said, communities trust museums, and want museums to help them sort of noodle, not a scientific word, but like sort of
I like noodle.
grapple with like, what does it mean to be a human in 2023?
Okay. And it keeps being redefined over and over. It's so strange. I have to ask this question. So why do you think that the Inland Empire, San Bernardino County is getting such little funding from the state compared to like,
Oh gosh. I think it's a cyclical thing, right? Like we were talking to an elected official staff member today,
to the
and
mic, please?
yeah,
There
and
we go.
he was saying, a lot of nonprofits don't know about how to contact their elected official, tell them about, what their opportunities are to support, and I think sometimes when you don't So many nonprofits are just working so hard to do their mission driven work, whether that is be a food bank or provide affordable housing or homeless services or art programs. And they're so busy doing that there's not a lot of time to think about, I'm going to get my strategy for Giving Tuesday out. I'm going to sit down with my elected official and I'm going to tell him what my needs are, right?
Hmm.
And so if you don't have the support to do that extra work, it's just like you're stuck in this cycle, right?
Yeah.
Of just trying to make payroll, trying to make sure that the people you serve are getting food and clothes and service and all of those things. So I think that that's been a cycle of not enough investment. I do think that there's been tremendous inroads made with some of the community foundation, other advocacy groups, talking to foundations about, can you invest in our nonprofits? And, if you give us $5, we'll turn it into 50. Nonprofits here in the Inland Empire are very creative, are very resourceful.
Hmm.
And so I'm hoping that that's going to shift a little bit. I don't know a lot about the funding formulas
Yeah.
for the state and the federal models. I'm sure that there's some elected officials who can talk a little bit more about those. I understand census data information is very important, making
Wow.
sure that everyone participates in the census data, that we are tracking the people who are actually living and working here. So if there's people who are not part of data collection, then they're not part of the formula to bring more funding here. I think that's been big. I think in the San Bernardino area, there's been a lack of civic engagement. And so
Okay.
I think it's really incredible the work that is happening here in San Bernardino, the Garcia Center is doing with community engagement, civic engagement around critical issues and making sure that elected officials are held accountable for what the community wants.
Okay.
I also think that we haven't done a great job in terms of diversity for our elected officials, diversity for people who serve on boards of trustees, right?
Okay.
So your board is going to appoint someone who acts like you, thinks like you, looks like you. So is there a diversity on your board that's thinking about community needs?
Gotcha.
So I think it's about civic engagement. It's about getting investment into the core structure. It's about electing officials that represent you and your community. I think the Inland Empire of 2023 is very different from the Inland Empire of like the
A
1980s.
big difference I've been hearing.
Yeah, you have
Yeah.
been hearing that.
Yeah.
So
From
yeah,
natives, from native people. Yeah.
yeah, it makes me really hopeful. Makes me really hopeful. Young artists, young professionals, they give me hope, right?
That's
Like,
good. That's good news.
yeah, right. That they are so bold and are, in articulating their vision and the change that they want to see. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
What do you think the importance is of having local artists, national and international artists come to the RAM Museum?
Well, I think it's about an exchange of ideas. And our curator, Todd Wingate, always talks about national significance, deep local ties. I think museums around the world are thinking about, how do I serve the communities that live less than a mile away from my institution?
Hmm.
And there's an author named Susan Straight who is in Riverside, and she always says something, and I know I'm not going to say this right, but like, the more local, the more personal a story is, the more universal it is,
I like it.
right? And so you have to have a deep understanding of the human experience in your space and share that. And that's going to resonate with artists that are working in Oklahoma or Texas or Connecticut. Like, this is how we're grappling with this sort of situation.
Hmm.
So I think local artists bring an authenticity, a voice, of experience within that community, and then there can be really meaningful dialogues happening at the national level. So, for example, demographic changes that's happening here in the Inland Empire, like, we are America in 20 years, right?
Hmm.
So I think that the work that our artists are creating and making has a lot of lessons for our nation, right?
Yeah.
How we are handling the logistics industry because we're the hub here, and air pollution, the hub, and climate change. I think the LA Times says, like, California's today is the nation's tomorrow, right?
Oh, interesting.
And so I think particularly here in California, if we're uplifting those local artists and voices, it does have national significance. And that's something that we've really been thinking a lot about with our strategic plan, is that how do we work with others in our community to uplift our voices, to make sure that we're part of the national dialogue.
I
Because
love
I think
that.
for so long outsiders were talking about the Inland Empire, the Inland Empire needs to talk about itself.
I like that. And we talked about it a little bit, but adapting to the times, I know people think, maybe, why should I come to a museum and stuff like that? How have you guys adapted to like the museums are still important?
Constantly, every single day. And I'm challenged by staff and by community saying, hey, yeah, that worked 2 years ago. We need to relook at it today. So I think it's, being very humble, being open-minded to constantly learning. How I ran a museum 4 years ago, totally different than how I run it today,
Gotcha.
right?
Can you give an example?
Oh my gosh. Um, I'm just thinking, there's so
You can
many.
just give us one thing.
Everything. Just, community stakeholder input,
Gotcha. Into the mic.
community stakeholder input,
Okay.
right? Community, serving community. What is a good reciprocal relationship with community?
Mm,
What does it mean to unpack identities and look at intersectionality of us all? What does equity truly look like in terms of, museum staff practice, representation? So many things. Like, what is
I
a
gotcha.
good philanthropic process?
Mm,
What does it mean to deeply listen to those you serve? It's all changed. It's all
wow.
changed for the better.
Yeah, yeah.
For the better,
Yes.
which I think gives me hope. And I think for me, one of the biggest things is, how are we hard on the problem, not on the people, right?
I
Because
like
we
that.
are reinventing centuries of dysfunctional systems.
I like
So,
that. Drew, can you please tell us some of the current projects you and your team are working on?
yeah. So our strategic plan is a huge goal. That's a really big project. At the Cheech, our artistic director, Maria Esther Fernandez, is working on a retrospective of Judith Hernandez's work. She was the fifth artist of the collective Los Four, the only woman. Her work is absolutely incredible. So that'll be a publication, huge. We continue to tour Kaleidoscope. It was a retrospective of the De La Torre brothers across the U.S. So we have a team working on that. It's in El Paso. It'll go to Philbrook in Oklahoma. At the Julia Morgan building, Lisa Henry's just opened a new show of Rico Gatson's work. He's an
Mm,
artist based out of Brooklyn, but grew up in Riverside. Incredible work. And she is hard at work at some new shows. Our contracted curator Todd Wingate and Kathy Gudis from UCR are working on a show with Noe Montes and Tom Sidra, who are lens-based social practice artists,
cool.
right, that are looking at environmental justice issues here in the community. The thing is, there's always something new to see at the Cheech and the Riverside Art Museum Julia Morgan building. Exhibitions change at least every 6 months.
Wow.
So we're busy with that. Charles Bibbs is going to be back in next year, early next year in the winter, doing lectures and artist talks. So we highly encourage everyone to follow us on Instagram, social media, Riverside Art Museum, or the Cheech Center. We're working on our membership strategy with the city of Riverside. They're going to be looking at the economic impact of the Cheech on our
Mm,
community, which is a really big deal. We are looking at ways how we can strengthen support of Native American communities here in our region. So are we showing Native American artists? Are they in our collection? How do we support them? So that is going to be a big initiative for us. So we're trying to just take stock of, what are we doing right? What do we need to shift and change? I think I shared with you, really thinking about how we can contribute to the ecosystem of local artists and curators.
yeah.
Cheech always says that Riverside is the next great art town. I know San Bernardino, like it's a competition, or not. We're working together.
Yeah.
But again, how do we make that happen, right? How do we support our artists
I love
to
that.
make sure that they can move forward in their careers.
I love that. So, just before we get out of here, and I want to thank you again so much, Drew, for being a part of here. Can you tell us maybe one thing that people don't know about you, and maybe something also, part two, that you like to do outside of the work, something that helps you relax?
Sure.
So something that's something that people that don't know about you, and something that helps you relax.
Yeah. Well, I shared this at a staff with a staff exchange once. Is I speak some Thai from my husband. My daughter's first language was Thai because a lot of time with her grandparents. So I speak some Thai. That's what people may not know about me.
Can
And
you
what
give us a look? Can you give us a little Thai? Can you speak a little Thai for us?
Milu, I don't know. Tanyan means I got to go to work.
Okay.
Mag is very beautiful. So
I love it.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. Michai is I disagree.
Okay. I disagree. She's like, your husband's talking to you. Micha.
Yeah, very important word in my family. Imlao, I'm already full.
Got you.
I'm
Aha.
full. And then things that relax me is gardening.
Ah.
I love many way gardening is also like working with children, raising children, working with really creative people, just in the sense that you can't force the garden to grow the way you want it to. Like every season is a humbling learning experience, right? Of like
Yeah.
my tomatoes didn't, like what happened with the tomatoes? Why
Yeah.
did the tomatillos do so well? The tomatoes don't. So I love the humility of being a gardener, right? That Mother
Nice.
Nature's going to do what Mother Nature's going to do. Like the plants are going to do what the plants are going to do.
Yeah.
And you're here to water and help, and the outcome is always amazing, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
the flourishing and thriving. And then I also find something healing just, being in the earth and feeling the dirt and being outside in the fresh air. And then the same way with hiking, like I understand that the earth like gives some vibrations. And so like just
Ah.
being out in forest, I think in Japanese they have a word for forest bathing, but just being out, like feeling the earth's vibrations. I think it goes again back to growing up in the Inland Empire and being out in these wide open spaces. And for me, that's like, those are really healing, as an introvert, I guess. But also spending time with my family and my loved ones is great. Although I know we just came from Thanksgiving. Fortunately, there were like no big arguments.
Ah. What's the word for I disagree?
Me shy.
Awesome. So what do you have a garden in your backyard currently?
Yeah,
What
yeah,
do you,
planter
what's one of the
boxes.
favorite thing that you're growing right now?
Tomatillos were awesome, and
Okay.
I was able to make salsa verde. I had a really great season with those. The marigolds were beautiful. My daughter got those as a gift from another little girl at her preschool, and they were just beautiful. I planted those in between the vegetables. They're a good co-companion for tomatoes and tomatillos. So I started to think about flowers. I was like, oh, I should grow more flowers. Right now, I'm trying to get the planter beds ready with for carrot seeds and snow peas. I love growing snow peas. It's something that the kids can just like take off the vine and eat, and they've got these really beautiful flowers. Kale is doing really well right
Oh,
now,
wow.
and chard. So it's chard. My collard greens are doing well. I'm trying to think what else. I still have some tomatoes.
Okay.
That's the thing about being in California is like you can kind of grow tomatoes
Like all around.
past Thanksgiving.
Yes.
So I grew corn this year, which was really fun.
No way.
And squash and
Okay.
yeah.
Winter
Yeah.
squash? Winter squash?
Winter squash, so butternut squash.
Okay.
And I heard that you're supposed to leave the butternut squash like out on the vine to mature before you bring it in. But I left it out so long that the squirrels and the possums got it.
They got it. Ah.
So yeah, the garden feeds many creatures that call my home home.
Okay. I love winter squash. It's so delicious.
Yes. Yeah.
It's so delicious.
It's so delicious.
Wow.
Yeah.
Drew, I want to thank you so much
Yeah,
again
thank
for being on the
you.
Empire. Let's say 100 years pass by,
Yes.
250 years pass by, a millennia.
Yes.
What would you like your empire to look like, whether it's in gardening, working
Wow.
in the art community, being a mother, a wife, all in combined? What would you like your empire to look
I
like?
think for my field, it's the museum world has a way of like unpacking and disregarding sort of the Anglo Enlightenment structure that's held it back from serving communities, right? Transcending the colonial legacies to really being institutions that represent today's culture, today's communities in ways that allow our cultures to flourish, that allow the transmission of knowledge from generation to generation so that there is no erasure, there is no loss of these critical critical stories. I love museums. I believe in them as institutions for collecting these stories, but there's a lot of work that they need to do in terms of their funding model. We talked about that in terms of the work that they do. So I would really like to see a totally transformed museum system and structure that contributes to a more just world.
Okay, so that's what you like your empire to look like.
That's what I'd like my empire, and also for the Inland Empire to flourish,
Okay.
and for it to be, I mean, just to be all that it can be, and people thinking about the Inland Empire, we're already changing that narrative, but that narrative to continue to be changed.
I love that. I love that. And it'll come.
It
will
will.
come. It's
It
come.
will.
It's happening.
It is.
I've been hearing it from everybody that they see a change
Appreciate that.
happening. Yeah, like
That's amazing.
someone was saying the other day, I think her name Debbie Vargas, she's like we're on the cusp of this movement happening right
Love
now.
that.
And I was like, wow, it's cool.
And you can feel it. You can feel it. And it's so exciting. Yeah.
I can't wait for the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Drew, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Can you please tell everybody how they can find you, support you, become a member? Can you please let everybody know how they can do that?
You can contact me at the Riverside Art Museum. I'm available through the phone there. You can contact me through social media, Riverside Art Museum, the Cheech Center accounts. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm usually at different opening exhibitions, receptions. So we really want to have you be part of our journey to engage, inspire, and build community through the arts here in the Inland Empire. And thank you. This has been really lovely. Appreciate this.
So glad to have you. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll have everything in the link in the description, so you can always just click on it and find her that way, find the team that way, support the team that way, and become a member of the Cheech and get a lovely pin, And yeah, I'll make it a little bit easier for you guys to see, but yeah, we'll do that. And so I want to thank her. I want to thank all you guys for listening, participating. Please like the video if you haven't, subscribe to our channel. If you haven't, comment down below what you thought. If you want to contribute to us, you can click any of our digital apps that are in the links. And I think we learned a lot, from her being an Inland Empire native, being in Naples. I thought it was very interesting about the thing about, these museums were like, hey, you're going to give us our stuff back. I think that's kind of funny, because it's like, who's going to go across the water to get it? But I think we learned a lot. And I want to thank you guys all. My name is Antonio Lee Miles, if you didn't know. And other than that, we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Okay? Peace.
Peace.
I say it's my duty. Yeah. Is it my will? Yeah. To do what? Yeah. To do what's right. I say.
Someone could walk in and be like, okay, it's Sunanda.
Yeah.
And think, oh,
Oh yeah, it's okay.
My car won't start at all. I have to go to the dealer to get another key, huh?
Questions I've been yammering on. Questions for me.
I think that's a good sign. I think I think that means I'm getting you. I think the comfortability is starting to happen more and more, which I think it's good.